showing up early, staying late, working through the grind, left foot, right foot, making the stuff happen, learning the new skills. Like, I tell people, like, the failure is not final. The failure is fertilizer.
Hey everybody, welcome to Solid. This is episode 23, and I've got a new co-host today, my beautiful wife, Kelsey. I'm excited she's here. I had to talk her into it. And today we've got a guest on the podcast that is absolutely going to change your life. I promise you're going to want to listen. You're going to want to take notes. He goes through a roadmap of how you can go change your life. You can start from wherever you're at right now and in a few years be living a dream life and really do something big. He's done it. He's lived it and is providing so much value for you guys on this podcast today. So we've got an incredible guest, Justin Prince, and I look forward to you guys listening to this one. So here it goes, episode 23. You see successful people, and this is really why we wanted you on, just so you know. Like, you see successful people, and it's like when you're not successful, when you haven't had any success, they make winning look so easy. And then when you win, you start realizing, like, oh, it's just habits. Yeah. Right? And then it teaches you how to have a good spiritual life, good family life, good business life, you know? What's your philosophies on that?
No, I agree. It's all interconnected. So when I work with sales organizations, I tell them it's all interconnected. Yeah. If you're crushing your business and your marriage is a complete disaster, at some point, like, the cracks will start to come into all of it. Yeah. Or if you're crushing your business and your health is just falling apart, you'll feel the cracks because of the weight of all the pressure. And so you want to get it all connected to where you're really trying to be a kind of a high performer in all of these different areas. So your marriage is on point, and your relationship with your kids is on point, your health's on point, you got a spiritual life that you're feeling connected. You're getting your business, where you need it, because it all kind of interconnects. Yeah. And if you can start to build excellence in all those different areas, the acceleration, the cumulative acceleration is off the charts.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I feel like that. I mean, we learned all this stuff, I guess, from example. So we started doing it without even realizing we were doing it, because we were just modeling everybody around us, right?
You guys were in a great environment to model,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, thankfully, we always say we're so grateful because we were 20 and 17 going into that environment. Like, we didn't even know what we didn't even know.
That's right.
Right?
For sure.
What do you think it was? I mean, was it kind of similar for you? What is your story? And obviously, you've built this incredible life, right? Built an incredible business. You got a great family. We had a chance to have lunch a couple weeks ago. And what was it for you? Do you think it was modeling? Was it intentional? Was it accidental? I mean, how did you build this incredible life that you've got today?
Yeah, it was a combination of all those things, because accidental, I would say, under like the category of luck. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by luck is, there's a great book I just finished by Jim Collins. Jim Collins wrote Good to Great.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And he wrote a book called How the Mighty Fall.
Okay.
And it's like a 5-step process. They research studied all these different companies that failed, big companies that you're like, there's no chance they could fall.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And step 1 was hubris, born of success. And it basically was like, it's all us. Like, no one's as smart as us. Like, there was no luck involved. There's like elements of just like, I don't know. I was like in the right situation, and I applied myself.
Right place, right time.
Right place, right time, and then applied myself. So I think that's how I would say, like, the accidental part. And then some of it was it was like left foot, right foot. It was just like you just kept doing the right things consistently, and those turned into good habits over time. Right. Some of it was modeling. I didn't have great models in some of those early years. Right. Really great mentors. I started to, kind of gravitate towards great mentors. You guys were in an environment where there was like already like developed systems and developed leadership within a really solid company. Right. That you could just kind of model those mentors. I didn't have that in those early years. But then one of the things that I teach, is, particularly as you become more self-aware, is to learn to live an intentional life. Mm-hmm. Right. And to be intentional in kind of all these key areas of your life. And most people live in a life of reaction to distractions versus a life of intentional creation. Right. And so in the Bible, the very first line of the Bible, and I'm an amateur on the Bible, but on the very first line, literally the first line of the whole thing, it says, in the beginning, God, and so it's like God introduces himself. In the beginning, God, and it says, did what to the heavens and the earth? He created. So like first thing is like, I'm a creator. Like he could have used a bunch of different titles. That's one he picked. Steve Jobs, who came more from like a Buddhist bend, so that's more like a Christian, Jewish, like,
Christian Judeo values.
Judeo values bend. The Buddhist bend was Jobs, and he says everything that we look around and now call life was created by someone else that's no smarter than you. And he says, so don't just live a life, build one or create one.
Right.
And it's like all the stuff that you see, at some point you kind of tune into like, someone had that idea and went and created that thing. From literally all of it. You know? And you start saying, there's no smarter than me. Like I could create stuff. They just did in Dubai, which is more of a Muslim side, but they just finished one of the big sculptures there. I'm trying to remember what it's called. And it talks about how we're here to create, So one of the things that you can do is you start learning, like, I'm a creator. Like, I'm not here just to live and breathe and die. I'm not just here to react to all the distractions of life. I'm here to like intentionally create my life, where it's in my, like, intentionally create your fitness, intentionally create your financial goals, intentionally create a marriage, like intentionally create a family, intentionally create a business. Like you start to like, I'm going to create some stuff, intentionally create content like you guys do with your podcast. Like you intentionally create it versus listen to everyone else's podcast. You start becoming your own creator of content. Right. And once you have that mind shift of like, I'm going to live an intentional life, that's a huge shift. Right. And then I think from there you start, getting into like, I'm going to go model. I'm going to put myself and go create my luck by putting myself in the right situations. Right. Apply myself with, a ton of tenacity. And so those, I think it's, like I said, it's kind of like this combination of all of those things that kind of created where I've ended up today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I always tell people you can almost learn everything except for desire. Yeah. Right. And I think if you want to create something, you have to have the desire to do it. Right. Yeah. So it's like the one thing I always tell everybody, I can teach you everything you need to know except for this one thing, desire. Yeah. If you have that, then
I teach it a little differently. It's the same. We're teaching the same thing. To me, it's heart, hunger, and hustle.
Okay,
which is it's desire is a more simple way to say those three words.
Right,
but you can't teach heart, you can't teach hunger, and you can't teach hustle.
Right.
You see it in athletes, their athletic prowess is off the charts. Their height, their weight, their speed, their jumping ability, but they don't have heart, they don't have hunger, and they don't have hustle.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man, it's like if you could like take that and put it into someone someone that's heart into that athlete, it'd just be off the charts. In business, if you can find the right situation for yourself, and then you have heart, like what you guys brought to the party 20 some odd years ago was a ton of heart, a ton of hunger, and a ton of hustle. And that burning desire to make something of your life. You take that and then you apply it into a good model. I mean, you really should be able to write your ticket at that point, because someone with that kind of level of heart, hunger, and hustle, they'll overcome, they'll persist, they'll figure things out,
Right.
No doubt about it.
Also, I think discipline, because a lot of people, we've seen a ton of people have desire, but then when it comes down to the discipline of doing what they have to do every single day, then a lot of times they fail. And you see somebody that you're like, they're so much better than I am.
Yeah.
But they just don't have that daily discipline to keep going.
Yes. You want to build skill above your talent. So talent's your floor, skill's your ceiling. And again, you guys had baseline talent, just like this innate. You start when you were really kids. 17-year-olds is still a kid, right?
Yep.
Right.
But you have this baseline talent, this like baseline, people come to a business with baseline talent. You then want to start building the skills and the habits above the talent. The talent's the floor, skills the ceiling. And that discipline that you're talking about, like I tell people, your habits don't care about your feelings. You talked about habits earlier. Yep. So true. Aristotle says excellence, which is like kind of the goal. Say excellence is your goal. Excellence is not an act. It's a habit. So he says, therefore we are what we repeatedly do.
Yep.
Right.
So it's not like I did it once. It's like, no, dude, I do it consistently, like with a ton of discipline and a ton of routine. And over time, your habits shape your whole life. You know?
Yeah.
It makes me think. Sure. Yeah, and what we repeatedly do is based off the thoughts we repeatedly think.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so often we've been programmed with these thoughts that are limited or whatever. If we can learn to change those thoughts, then we'll change our actions. Right. What? Tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Yeah.
Did your upbringing shape some of this desire? And
Yeah, I absolutely think it did. So my folks got divorced when I was 12. We were kind of middle class family. Folks got divorced when I was 12. We moved 13 times in the 7 years through the teenage years.
All in Utah?
We were at that point, we were all in Utah. The only time I've lived outside of the state for an extended period of time, I lived in Mississippi and Louisiana for a couple of years.
Okay.
Doing like a mission work. But
okay.
We just kind of bounced around. I was raised by single parents, but I lived at my mom's house. Mm-hmm. And so I was, you're with a single mom. She's trying to make it happen. We're just moving all the time. And I was in sports. Sports was a kind of a big deal to me at that time. I played different sports at the time.
What kind of sports did you play?
Football, basketball, track, and I used to box.
Okay.
I used to fight.
Awesome. Me too, man. I was a boxer.
Yeah, we were talking about that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
There's something powerful about you versus it's just like you can't pass the ball.
Yeah, you get exposed.
And they're punching you in the face as hard as they freaking can. It's just like, all right, we gotta like, it's a little primal at that point, And so when I was 8, it's so interesting looking back now. My dad was he is a land developer, and at the time was a land developer home builder. So he'd be developing a piece of property. Mm-hmm. And so they'd have like the big, huge dumpsters that come out there. And I was what they called the gopher. Oh. Like go for this, go for that, go for this. So I was 8 years old. Mm-hmm. And in the summer when I'm not in school, he would drop me off at 8 in the morning and pick me up at 5 o'clock at night. And I would just like pick up wood pieces and sweep things out. I'm like, wow. I'm sure we broke like many child labor laws or something like that. But he'd pay me to do it. But I also thought I think a lot of that work ethic started then. And when I wasn't in sports, kind of our rule was if you weren't in sports, you had a job. If you were in sports, that he would kind of count that as my employment, And I remember we lost our last basketball game. I cried my eyes out on a Thursday night, just bawled that whole night long that we lost. And then that Friday night after school, I thought he would give me the weekend to like lick my wounds. Mm-hmm. Friday night, I was making pizzas at Papa Murphy's Take and Bake Pizza. He just instantly got into it. So I think that was part of it that helped for sure. But I was, my dad had he had kind of moderate success, and then he had a lot of success. He went from basically a zero net worth, in like 1991 to a $10 million net worth in like 2007, 2008.
Okay,
and then lost everything.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Literally
sold everything. He's one of the only developer builders that his contractor is saying that they didn't go bankrupt. He just fought through it, sold everything he had, just lost it all. So I kind of watched these different ups and downs in the real estate world. And I think that shaped me to say I wanted to create something that I felt like at least had some semblance of a little bit more stability.
Yeah.
And just kind of manage, not that I felt like he was necessarily a bad manager of it. Some of it was circumstance, some of it was maybe some decisions. But I wanted to just create a kind of a different environment.
Yeah.
I could feel a lot of his pressure as he was coming up with some of those different projects. It felt like we were a little feast and famine.
Yeah, I feel like most developers are that way, right? It's a very common thing.
He was a hard worker for sure. It's actually interesting. I feel like as I go back through the lineage of my like grandparents and so on, each generation has provided like a little bit better situation for the next one.
Yeah.
And like, I'm trying to create a better situation for my next one, So
amazing.
5 generations ago, my 5-generation great grandpa, his name was George Prince. George and Sarah came from England to South Africa. So 9,000 miles. When they got there, they fought against the Soshu tribe. It was the native tribe. And you didn't want to lose the Soshus. The Soshus are really brutal. Like if they captured you, instead of just killing you, they would strip you naked. They would put you in this grease, kind of like a honey grease.
Oh my gosh.
And then they would rope you down on these anthills and then break the anthills, and the ants would just consume the people.
Oh my gosh.
So you didn't want to be captured.
Wow.
So my 5th generation uncle Uncle John, was killed during some of those battles. They eventually came to the States in 1855, the last wagon train west, and Sarah had 5 kids, and then she was pregnant with twins. And she had the twins in the wagon train. They both died shortly after. They hand dug these graves, buried these little babies. And so then they get to Salt Lake, and she never emotionally or physically recovered.
Right.
So she dies. So here's George. Your brother's now dead. Your 2 babies are dead. Your wife's now dead. You've traveled 18,000 miles in the pursuit of opportunity, in the pursuit of your faith, in the pursuit of like your family, trying to create a better situation for your family. And I think a lot about George. Like George was, the amount of resilience and and heart and hustle and hunger and like the desire to like live a better life for his kids to have a better life than he had. And his son was Francis. Francis had John. John was, his son was Ken. The Ken that had my dad, Alan, then me. And now I have like my kids, and I'm trying to create a situation where they have a better life than I have, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So I think that hustle and that hunger and that desire for the next generation to be better is like passed down through those generations.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy to think about the price that George actually had to pay. Right.
Think of it this way, dude. If you have your parents, there's 2, then you have grandparents, there's 4. Mm-hmm. And if there's divorce, maybe you have like a bonus grandma, bonus mom, but just the actual biological line. If you go back 12 generations, it's a period of about 400 years, give or take. And it was 4,094 people from all over the world that came together to create you. Mm-hmm. Yep. So 4,094 stories, 4,094 trials, 4,094 triumphs, lots of joy, lots of pain, lots of different parts of the earth that they all came together to have like to make you live right now. And I try and remind people that you're the one. Yep. You're the one that they all bled for. You're the one that they all lived for and worked so hard for. And I encourage people to be the one, not become the one, because you already are the one, but go be it. Step into that person. Go be the one that future generations of kids that are yet unborn look up into that family lineage and they say it was her or it was him. She's the one that changed our family's life forever. She's the one that taught us the economic principles. She's the one that built the business. He's the one that broke the generational curse.
Yep.
He's the one. You want to be that one today.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't you think the difference is that I feel like as you're telling that story, it's almost like you're putting yourself in the situation of your grandfather, right, George? And as you talk about that and talk about being the one, it's almost like you're taking responsibility for where you're at, the actions you take, and then the outcome as well. And I feel like a lot of people, they'll listen to those stories, but it's almost like they're looking at it through a third-person example. Yeah. Like they never actually include themselves in like, what if I actually had to do this? What if I had to travel 18,000 miles, lost my spouse, my kids, and then to still have the hope to keep going, right? Do you feel like that you maybe put yourself in that situation a little bit more realistically than someone who hasn't maybe won big, and that might be a separator of how you take responsibility for the situation that you're in and the future?
That's such an interesting question. I don't know if I do it I don't know if that's like a separator from a success perspective, but I would definitely say this. When I share that story's, I want you to think about it not as a story of my grandpa. It's your story, right? It's like this heritage. It's your great grandma.
Yeah.
She gave everything she had so that you'd have this moment, you know? And you're her heritage, and you'll have your great grandbabies that will have their heritage, and it's you. You know, they'll look up and say it was her or it's him. What I'd also say is this: we want to rid and raise. It's like a pulley system. So as you rid yourself of all entitlement, as you rid, you'll raise your personal responsibility, like your personal accountability. And you want to just rid yourself of all entitlement. All entitlement just meaning that someone owes you something.
Right.
That like the government owes you something, or your parents owe you something, or, you know, your spouse owes you something. Like you want to rid yourself of all entitlement. And we live in a world right now where entitlement's like this thing. You know, it's like, it's like, no, you do owe me something because of whatever reason. And I'm not trying to discount the pains that people have been through or the hurts that they've encountered. It's not that, but the more that you can rid yourself of that, what happens is you also take this personal responsibility saying, going back to what we talked about, I get to create my own life.
Yeah.
And like, I get to live a significant life, and I get to like be the one that like changes it for my family versus blaming my family. They're the reason I'm going to change.
Right.
You know? And that rid and raise to me, I feel like has been like foundational in that's the one I would tell you has been foundational in my success.
Yeah.
Ridding yourself that I was owed something, and then raising my personal responsibility, saying, if I'm going to go make something in my life, I've got to go out there and make it, pay the price, do the thing. As you know, success is leased, not owned, and rent's due every single day. You got to go pay that price every single day.
Yep. That's awesome, man. What a great, I think what a great tip for a lot of people who feel like maybe they're not winning as fast as they should, or maybe they just haven't had success in the past. What a great, easy thing that they can wake up every day and remember, right? Rid and raise. I think anybody can remember that. What a great tool.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, I know you had told us when we ate lunch that you used to sell Bibles, right? At a kiosk.
Animated videos.
Yeah. And you were an employee, right?
Yeah. Well, I was like a 1099, like a salesperson.
Okay. And then right after that is when you kind of went into business for yourself. I just kind of wanted to hear that story. Because I know there's crossroads when you can make decisions like, should I stay here and do this, or I could do this, and that made your life.
Yeah, it's such a good question. So we live in a society right now where there's a hashtag called quiet quitting. And if you've heard this or followed this, quiet quitting basically says, I'm not going to quit my job. I'm not going to resign or leave or quit, but I'm going to basically do everything at the bare minimum. So at 4:59, I'm leaving. I'm not working extra. I'm not putting in any heart, any desire into this. I'm going to quietly quit. And the logic is, the employer doesn't value me, so screw you. I'm going to quietly quit. Now I'm going to still get my pay, but I'm not going to putting in any extra effort. I feel like it's like the exact opposite formula that you would want, to have. And you say, I tell people, always do more than you're paid for as an investment in your future. Like show up early, stay late. You say, but they're not valuing me. They're not valuing the effort I'm putting in. What I would share is, then let's build your skill sets to where you go to a company or an organization that does value that kind of tenacity and that kind of attitude. In other words, don't just stay there if it's not working for you and it's not a healthy environment for you and you're putting in that extra effort and you've got a great attitude and great skill sets. Let's find a better environment for you. Maybe you start your own business, or maybe you go to a different employment situation. So for me, and then the second thing I'd say is you want to string wins together. String wins together. Like I tell people, bloom where you're planted right now.
Yeah.
And if you're in like that Bible sales job, I worked at a mall kiosk. I tease people the malls were like, we all used to go, and the Amazon was a river. I worked at the mall. People were like, what's the mall? And I was the guy at the mall you tried to like not make eye contact with because you didn't want to like get sucked into my mall kiosk, you know?
Yeah.
But like I learned to succeed there. I became at that time the best sales guy they'd ever had at the time, 28 years. And I share that not to boast or brag. I just share that to say I maximized it. I was like the best that you could become at that moment.
Yeah, but you became the best because it's the same habits. You became the best there is the reason why you're winning now.
That's what I'm saying. That's why this quiet quitting thing is the opposite way to build success.
Right.
Is you can't I'm not going to work on myself. I'm not going to have a good attitude. Yep. I'm not going to show up with any passion or heart or desire and put work in. When you do that, you're going like the wrong direction of the success you want to build. You want to do more than you're paid for. And you say, but I don't want to give it to this company. I don't like the culture. You're not doing it even necessarily for them. You're doing it for you.
For your character.
Yes.
For your credibility, for who you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you start stringing wins together.
Yeah.
When you string wins together, it's honestly like, think of how we met. We met because from different paths, we were stringing wins together, right? And in other words, when you string wins together, you just doors start opening up and you start meeting the right people. Yep. We met at Monty's office. Yep. Like, I mean, come on. Like, if I wouldn't have strung wins together, I never would have met him. If you wouldn't have strung wins together, you never would have met him.
Right.
We definitely wouldn't have been hanging out at his office.
Right.
And that's how, when you string wins together, the opportunities, the doors start to open. That's why quiet quitting is like the exact opposite formula you want to have.
Yeah.
And you say, I'm gonna invest in myself. And part of investing in myself, I'm gonna give my employer, I'm gonna be the most irreplaceable employee they've ever had here. I'm gonna go make it happen. So for me, I'm doing this. Now, what happened to me is I became the top salesperson. And I remember thinking to myself, every Monday morning I was at zero. Like every January 1st I was at zero. It's almost like I had to start over.
Yeah.
And I was working super hard. I was setting all these goals. I wrote him 9 different proposals on how I thought we could expand the business and basically, go do more. And at that stage of their career, in the business cycle, they just were kind of like, they didn't want to, they were just, they were more in the retirement end of their business cycle. And so they weren't like, let's go invest money and let's go make this thing happen. And so I felt like I had just outgrown the box.
Right.
And so for me, I was just like, I just became open to opportunity. And, what is it that says success happens when preparedness meets opportunity? That's kind of what happened.
Yeah.
I had prepared myself through all of that work. And then I found, an opportunity, and then that starts leading you on that path to success. But that first business failed. Yeah. First business failed. I was below zero financially, back on credit cards, back on taxes. At one point, moved my pregnant wife and our 2 kids into the loft of my wife's parents' garage. So I'm 27 years old. I have 2 babies sleeping in the closet of the loft of my wife's parents' garage. My wife and I are sleeping up there. I work every evening, working every weekend working, and then all day I try and build my little entrepreneurial little business. And there was many nights I'm like, man, what am I doing with my life? Is this ever going to happen for me? But all of that started, compounding over time to where you're building those skills, always doing more than you're paid for as an investment in your future, showing up early, staying late, working through the grind, left foot, right foot, making the stuff happen, learning the new skills. Like I tell people, like the failure is not final. The failure is fertilizer.
Right.
And the failure is not a person, it's an event. And so your success will grow in the fertilizer of failure. You do that invite, it's just brutal. And you're like, that did not work. Well, you learn something.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you do that follow up and you're like, that was just painful. Like what happened? Or you do that first video and you're just like, that was the worst video I've ever seen in my life, or first podcast or whatever it is. And you're just terrible. You're just like, oh my gosh, that's the fertilizer. That's how you start to grow.
Yeah. You have to be willing to look bad before you can get good at something.
No question. I think one of the biggest things that holds people back is not actually the fear of failing. It's the fear of looking small.
Oh, yeah.
Like they have their job or their employment, and then like starting a new business, they're like, I'm going to start a new business, but I'm going to be this big in this new business.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't want to start and look this big because in my job, I'm kind of a big deal. Like people know who I am and so on. But that went on now to, build, 5 different multi-million-dollar businesses. Our current business has done almost $2.5 billion in revenue.
Awesome,
and
man.
in the last number of years. And so it's just turned into this compounding life. Tony Robbins says, most of us overestimate what we can accomplish in a year. We underestimate what we can accomplish in 5 or 10 years. That is so true.
Yeah.
It was harder than I thought it was going to be. It took longer than I thought it was going to take. It was more stressful than I thought it was going to be, and it's so much bigger and more worth it and better than I thought it could possibly be.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's just this interesting dichotomy of the time it takes.
Yeah, it's almost like the destination is hard to describe. It's almost like there's words. The journey is like this roller coaster. It's like, how do you explain it at the end? Like how it feels once you've arrived at this place is so much better than you imagined the whole time. And you're willing to do that throughout this whole roller coaster, right? And then you get there and you're like, man, it's just better than I could have imagined. I wrote down a note here that seems to me, as you were going through this, you never lost hope, right? And I think Kelsey and I can say one of our common denominators, and I think the thing that was good for us is, if there was a time I was down, she was up.
Yeah.
And, vice versa. But it seems like you never lost hope. I mean, I'm sure there was times you were down on yourself, beating yourself up, right, mentally.
Of course.
But how do you feel about that statement? I mean, for me, that's how I hear it when you're telling your story.
Yeah, so I'm in the middle of the grind. We're living in the loft of my wife's parents' garage. I went and worked I'm building my business, but then I went and got that old job back. So I'm up at the Western Idaho State Fair. It's in Boise, Idaho. And if you've ever been to a fair, like a state fair, you're just like, what is happening here?
Especially in Idaho.
Oh yeah, you just can't get out of there fast enough, So I'm up at this Western Idaho State Fair. I work, I think it was like 2 weeks. And if you've been in a fair, you work from like 8 a.m. to midnight every night. It's ridiculous. And just, you can only take so much funnels and churro cakes and, whatever. It's just, at some point you're like, get me out of here. And I start driving home on the Saturday night. I leave at about 11:30. It's a solid 5 hours from Boise to Salt Lake, maybe 5.5. So I've been gone for 2 weeks. I've been grinding. I'm literally at my wit's end. Driving home, my eyes start to flicker. If you've ever had that happen where you're like, I'm going to fall asleep, this is not going to go well. And right then I'm in the middle of nowhere, Idaho. There's a rest stop. So I pull my white Toyota Corolla in, I put it in park, I literally lock the doors, I put the seat back like this, and no kidding, I put my fist like this. And I thought, if some disgusting trucker wants a piece of me, they are going to pick the wrong car tonight. 'Cause I was just done. I was emotionally done. I was financially spent. I was like, what? I'm done chasing this dream,
Right.
About probably 2 hours later, I woke up, put my seat back up, shook it off, put it in reverse, and kept driving home. I get home on a Sunday morning. I get home, the sun's coming up. My wife has got these cute little kids, these little babies ready for church. Like, they look so cute. They run up, Dad's home. I'm like, grab your leg. She looks at me. My eyes are weary. My shoulders are hanging down. My chin's down. I'm done. I'm like out of hope. I'm out of belief that this is even possible anymore. And she gives me a hug. People have said to me, they're like, what did she say to you? I don't think she said anything, but she was just kind of like, gave me a hug. Like, we got this.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to be fine. Do you know what I'm saying? Well, dude, check this out. 1 year later, no kidding, probably 2 or 3 days, my business had finally kind of caught a gear. My income had risen dramatically. I'd gone from like the white Toyota Corolla, 250,000 miles, to a beautiful BMW. We'd gone from the loft of my wife's parents' garage to a luxury home. my credit cards are paid off. I'm back. My taxes are, I'm just like, I was like living what was once like this vision. I was like actually living it. It was almost surreal. Mm-hmm. And we launched a new business, a new team up in Boise, Idaho. Mm-hmm. And I'm with this guy. We're driving back home. And as we're driving, it was almost surreal. I'm driving like this. We're just talking. We're dreaming and thinking. And my life is completely different. And I like look past him through the window, and it's that same rest stop. Because we like did the meeting, and then they had dinner after, and then the dinner after the dinner, and the meeting after the meeting. So it was late.
Driving home late at night,
you know. Yep. And all of a sudden, I like had this like vision. I was like, I could like see that white Toyota Corolla, you know, with this like young father, worn out, stressed out, out of gas. And I could like see him pull in there. I could like see his trunk full of all these different things he's selling to try and keep his family afloat. And I almost wanted to reach out and talk to him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wanted to be like, don't you give up, boy. Yeah. Don't you quit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like there are years of success and happiness ahead. Yeah. And you get your shoulders back and you get your chin up, and don't you give up, boy. Don't you quit. Oh my gosh. And I think of that now. And my wife was like this, like an anchor, like a rock. You know, she's just strong. And so even when we're just like, I tell people, I think it would be a special woman to be married to me, because it was such an interesting journey. You know, it wasn't like the straight line journey. Mm-hmm. And she was just such a rock and such a pillar that when I look back at that all now, you know, it all kind of comes full circle. Like I don't typically sleep in my car anymore, you know, and you don't have those days. But those days are also where your hope kind of got anchored. Yeah. That like, yo, you got this. Like keep moving forward. Yeah.
It's also, I think your character is born, you know, it's times like that. You have a chance to make a choice to do the hard thing. Yeah. Right. You choose it. And then you look back on it, you go, it was those hard choices. Kelsey and I were talking about the other night. Man, I'll start crying now. If I posted this Instagram post the other day. I don't know if you saw it. My goals, right? So early on in our career, we had just moved to Idaho. We moved to Boise. It's kind of crazy that this is the story.
Something's magical about Boise.
Yeah. So think about this. We had just moved to Boise, scared to death. We were just young, 22 and 19. We weren't married yet. And we just wrote our goals down, you know?
We were told, you have to write your goals down. You have to write your goals down. We wrote them down. Like we moved into a mother-in-law quarters of a new recruit, right? We're selling these people on, hey, we're going to make so much money. Yeah. And then we're like, can we live in your
I've been there. I get it.
We didn't have.
You're like selling a dream you're not living yet, you know?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
People say you can't sell the dream when you're living a nightmare. I disagree.
Yeah. I mean, we had vision.
We owned it already. Yeah.
But these goals.
Yeah. So the other day I'm going through my office and I found that exact paper. So I write out this message, and dude, I could not stop crying.
That's so powerful.
And it wasn't even that, oh, man. It was like happy, right? It was like, dude, I remember how I felt at that time, like writing, like you at the rest stop was like me in this like new recruits, like garage. Basically, they converted it into a bedroom, and here I am, just like, man, am I making a mistake? Moved 9 hours away from my family, had no money, we're struggling. You know, doing appointments at night. We were talking about one night I got a phone call 1 o'clock in the morning, and it's like, all right, I'll be there. I go do the appointment and I close, man. It worked out. It turned out good. And it was like those times, right? When you have and you look back on them, you go, you made the choice to do the hard thing. And then you know that that's what causes success. I go back to that quiet quitting thing you were talking about. I think for me, as I listen to you say this stuff, it's sad to me that I didn't know that was a thing. It's sad to me because I believe the exact opposite is true as well. When you said that, I wrote serving others. Like I just live my life based on this thing. If I have something to offer of value and I can serve, God will return that blessing multiplied. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I don't know what it's going to be. We were talking about it on the way over here. And I just believe that if you do more than paid for, if you over deliver for other people, then naturally God rewards those with massive blessings that are multiplied beyond what you could imagine, right? And it's hard to, you know, I guess for a believer, for me, I think about if you're a believer, our goal should be to give more than we possibly have, knowing that that's what makes the world a better place, right?
I love that story.
Crazy that it was Boise as well.
I've had very, very similar stories to that. I tell people the foundation of your success is believing in yourself. It's your confidence. Yeah. And I literally have a picture just like that one. My son brought up like a box one day out of our cold storage, and it had like all these old personal development books I used to read and all these notes I used to take and so on. And I was looking through this one. It would be a notebook just like this, had like the event logo because it was one of our events.
Yeah.
And like it was named, the event was named something. Yeah. And so I'm like looking at it, has all my notes. I remembered the different speakers. I was in the back of the room. There was like 6,000 people or whatever. And I was like, I had me and my whole team, which was like 2 people, there there sitting in the back. And the last page, this is when I was below zero financially. Business had failed. Loft, wife's parents' garage, like, you're not crushing life right now. And on the last page, I like read all the notes at the very bottom in all caps. It says, I believe in myself. And I was like, I couldn't believe I wrote that because I was like, I didn't have really a bunch of reasons to believe in me at that point.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have confidence right now, someone's listening, they're like, I don't believe in myself yet. I don't have confidence this is going to work. There's a C before confidence that's courage. Mm-hmm. You have courage to do that meeting. You have courage to take the action. You have courage to write the goals when you're like, what are we doing? Writing these goals. So courage will precede the confidence, but the confidence creates commitment. Where there's no confidence, there's no commitment. But the more, if you're like, hey, I believe in myself, that will get you committed. I tell people you want to be straight line committed. Most people are like super in on the good days, super out on the bad days. Super in, super out, super in, super out. Fastest way in math from A to B is a straight line. So you just straight line commitment. You're just get in, stay in. Get committed, stay committed, go all in. Mm-hmm. The commitment will lead to competency. And competence is your skill sets. We talked about this earlier. Mm-hmm. The more committed you are, the more committed you are to building these skills, like learning how to invite, learning how to follow up, learning how to present, learning how to do what you do, learning your product and your service and so on.
Actually having value to provide, right?
Learning to have something to say, you know. Then once you build competency, that leads to clarity. You start seeing the path with way more clarity. You're like, I got this. I can make this thing happen. Like, this isn't that far away. Right. The clarity then is all built on your character. Mm-hmm. And John Wooden Price says it best. He said, be more concerned with your character than your reputation.
Yeah.
He says, your character is what and who you really are. Your reputation is just what people think you are.
Yep.
And so you start building it. Now, here's what's interesting. As you do that, that will build more confidence. The confidence will build more commitment. Mm-hmm. More commitment, you build those skills to where you get razor sharp. That leads to more clarity. You build this identity of your character, and it just loops.
I love that you said that, because it kind of brings me back to what I said at the beginning, to where almost people who win make it look easy.
Yeah. And
you literally just gave the formula for why that happens.
Yeah.
Right. Because these habits reinforce themselves.
That's exactly right.
Over time, and so, and then I think another thing is,
it's a great way to say it.
Yeah. Tell me about this. I think as we look at those goals, now today, they're almost embarrassingly small, right? They were stuff like make $100,000 a year, save $10,000,
buy a couch,
buy a couch.
I love
right?
that.
They were just like, today they're almost like embarrassingly small. However, the emotion that I get when looking at these goals is the same as achieving a goal today, or even bigger, because where we started and now I realize how possible setting a goal and going achieving something is. How do you feel about, I'm sure your goals have grown over the years. We talked about this, right? And kind of your journey. How do you feel about those goals you set early on? Was there ever a time early on in your career where you set goals and then maybe you went back and you were almost embarrassed they were so small, but at the time they seemed so big?
Yeah, no question. I remember one of my goals was to have $2,000 in my bank account. It's like, I got this, dude. Let's go. And, you start building them. Here's the thing, though. Success is an identity process, and you'll never outperform the way you see yourself.
Right.
Amen.
And so if you see yourself as a loser, you're not going to show up and pay the price that a winner would pay. If you see yourself as a winner, you're not going to lay down and quit like a loser would.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that 2,000 or 10,000 or new couch or new microwave, those little goals are actually the ones that start reinforcing this thing of like, I'm a winner. I got this thing. It reinforces an identity.
Yeah.
And then the identity starts to build a little bit over time of like, I can do more. I can give more. I can serve more. The book Magic of Thinking Big, you can sum up the whole book in 7 words, which is you are what you think you are. Mm-hmm. And so you want to like start to say to yourself, what would I dream if I could dream? And so maybe that 10,000 starts to be like, if I could have $100,000 in savings, or like $1 million in savings. Now, remember, the million may be so far out of your ability to even wrap it, where the 10,000 is actually pushing your belief system at this point. Go chase the 10.
Yeah. Yep.
And once you chase the 10, you built this muscle, this like skill set to say, okay, if I can chase the 10, I'm gonna go chase 100.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I'm gonna go chase it from there. And you start to build that because it reinforces this identity. I've got what it takes.
Yep.
But I would say this just to counter all of that. I would encourage people to learn to believe bigger, faster.
Yes.
And pay the price. Remember, it takes time and it takes effort. So even if you put in very little effort, it will take more time.
Right.
If you put in tons of effort, it'll take less time. But it still takes time, still takes effort. But the more time you put in, and the more effort you'll collapse. The time still takes time. The more that you put those into the pot, the faster these goals start to become real goals. Like they're not like just these pipe dream things, because you start to compound.
Right.
That's really powerful.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
One thing I mean, just being in business with people, you see people get, momentum and they're doing great, maybe a month, maybe a 2 months, 6 months, and they start having some success and then they kind of relax, right? And then they just go backwards. And so, I mean, what do you think separates somebody from doing that to keep going forward and hitting all their goals? Because it's just that resilience of keep going, keep doing the right things, and you're going to get there. But people go, oh, I made $100,000 or I saved $100,000. I'm good.
Yeah.
And then they just slowly go back and now they're back at ground zero.
Yeah. So Jim Collins, it's a great question. Jim Collins wrote a book called Good to Great, and then he wrote a book called How the Mighty Fall. And in How the Mighty Fall, he says step one is hubris born of success. We start to we talked about this earlier. You start to kind of get to this place of I'm good. I've got it all figured out. The first thing you have to do is you have to stay the opposite of arrogance would be humility, but this hubris is I'm good at this stage. There's nothing else I need to learn. So the first thing is stay humble, stay hungry. We talked about that.
Yeah.
Second thing is set new goals. You got to set bigger goals. Tell people there's 3 stages to the game. There's the dream, the struggle, the victory, and they're all equal. So in other words, if you have a big dream, you signed yourself up for a big struggle or a struggle that's equal to the size of the dream, and then a victory equal to the size of the struggle. Yep. What we want, as you know, is like big, huge dreams, super small struggles, big, huge victories. Like I got this big dream. I don't want it to be too hard, but then I got some big victories I'm looking for. They're equal. Yep. Now, if you want a small struggle, that's okay too. You just have to have a small dream and then a small victory.
Right.
So one of the challenges we have is once we've gone through, I had a dream, I went through the struggle and now I made the $100,000.
Yeah.
Then it's what do we do now? You have to go dream a bigger dream.
Right.
And a lot of people are like, I don't want to dream a bigger dream, because now I have to go pay the price for that dream and go through the struggle to earn it.
Yep.
But small dreams don't inspire big people. Tony Robbins says people are not lazy. They simply don't have dreams that inspire them. You want to dream a dream that inspires you. And then the second part is what you talked about earlier. It's this idea of serving. Once you dream a dream that inspires you, wakes you up early, keeps you up late, it could be the couch for now, it could be the $10,000 in the savings for now, and it might grow over time.
Right.
The second level of dreaming is you dream a dream that inspires others.
Yeah.
You're able to dream a dream. So A.L. Williams dreamed a dream that inspired more than just him.
Yeah.
Yes. People could dream within the dream. It became big enough that other people could achieve. His vision was big enough, the dream was big enough that other people could come into the vision, come into the dream. And that's what great dreamers do.
Yeah.
Walt Disney started with a pencil and a mouse. Mm-hmm. Steamboat Willie. It was just a small little dream. That was kind of his dream. And then that started turning into where he built the dream within the dream. But remember, Epcot centers, Disneyland Japan, cruise liners, that wasn't Walt's dream.
Right.
That was someone else's dream. But he created this environment where the dream was big enough that those dreams could kind of come up into it as well. So that's what I'd say is you got to dream bigger again and go through that struggle again. And the last thing I'd say is build the skills. You got to go build new skills.
Building skills.
And because the current skills that have gotten you where you are aren't going to take you to the next level. You've got to build new skills, new competencies. Right. You got to become better at what you do.
And what is the best way to do that, would you say? What have you done to do that?
I did a a magazine interview once. And at the end of it, it was like an interview like this. And at the end, the guy was on the phone. He goes, "Thanks so much." He goes, "Let me ask you a question." He goes, "How did this all happen?" It was kind of a similar question. He's like, "How did you go from broken home and selling Bible videos with no college education to a couple billion in what?
Yeah.
What happened?" And I thought about it and I was like, how do I simplify what happened? And it really was 4 things. It was read, listen, surround, apply. It was like 4 kind of key things. So number 1 is read great books. I believe that the books you read will define you. And so if I wanted to build new skills or new mindsets or new competencies, I would get really intense about studying books. Number 2 is listen to inspiring information. Whether it's podcasts like this, whether it's like you could be sitting right here next to us, and this is like a mentoring session with people that have, maybe a couple years ahead of you, on the path a little bit, and you're like, all right, got it. Well, it's the same as if we were sitting right here, but you're doing it through a podcast, right? Yep. So my brothers used to make fun of me at the gym, and I say this not knocking them. They would kind of tease me. They're like, dude, we're listening to whatever song at the gym, and you're, like getting me all fired up, and you're listening to like Tony Robbins or something. Like, what's wrong with you?
Jim Rohn or
something like that. And it was true. And people say, how do you know all these quotes? Dude, I've listened to so much stuff for so long that at some point it just like starts to be in your brain.
It programmed you, right? Yeah. You programmed yourself.
Program. It's the books you read, things you listen to. It's what I call I equals IO. So I is your inputs in equal your inputs out.
Yeah.
So if you're pouring a bunch of crap in your mind, the inputs out are the same junk that's coming in. So if you start programming it with some positive stuff, you have positive stuff come out. So read, listen, surround yourself with great people.
Yeah.
And I would encourage people to proactively look for people that lift them up. I call it the rule of 33, by the way. Rule of 33 for me is you spend 33% of your time with people above you.
Yeah.
Like I met you at Monty's office. Monty's, he's above me. Yep. And he inspires me to think bigger, do bigger, be bigger, right? He pulls me up. So he's someone that's further on the path than I am. That's a lift up for me. Then 33% of the time with people that you can kind of collaborate with that are in essence kind of playing the game at the level you're playing it at, right. Their marriage, they have kids the same age as you, and their businesses, so because you can learn and collaborate together. And then 33% of your time is the people that are further down the path than you are, because you can learn a lot through teaching. You can learn a lot through lifting those people up as well. Yeah. So that rule of 33 is something that I try and proactively live by. That's how I surround myself with those people. And then the last thing is apply what you learn.
Yeah.
And Da Vinci said, it's he that doeth the deed that hath the power. If you want the power, you got to do the deed. Yeah. So it's not just the reading. It's not just the listening. It's not just the surrounding. It's like the application, because it's not an information process. It's an application process. And so if you wanted to build new competencies and go to the next level in your career, I'd get super intentional on those 4 things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I know one of the things, tell me about this. You talk about surrounding yourself with good people, proactively looking for those people. One of the things we constantly taught is the power of association, right? Which is surrounding yourself with great people, but then also the power of disassociation, right? Question. Sometimes very important to understand if you disassociate yourself from, whether it's people or events or whatever it may be, that has just as much value in your success as the opposite, right?
There's no question. You can't hang out with the same Les Brown was born in a linoleum floor with his brother Leslie Wesley. His mom gave him up for adoption. Mamie Brown adopted him, and she says to him, baby, she says, if you hang out with losers, you're going to be a loser. She said, if there's 9 losers, you're bound to be the 10th. Yep. You can't hang out with a bunch of dirt balls and think that you're just going to be the man, or the woman. You gotta surround yourself proactively with people that lift you up, inspire you, that you can inspire, you can pull up. And so when you do that, what also happens is you start to disassociate. Sometimes it's hard because sometimes it's like it's your mom or your sister, and you're like, freak, how do I do this? And what you have to do is, I would encourage people, in other words, you can't disassociate from them. It's, you still see them at Sunday dinner, and you still see them at Christmas, whatever it is. But you can limit. And you can also limit the impact that they're having on your dreams. They're like, you're still doing that, and they're kind of tearing you down a little bit. You can limit the amount of weight that you give those words.
The amount of influence,
yeah. You say, Mama, I love you in these areas. Like I love you to death.
Right.
But in this particular area, I'm gonna listen to those that believe in me and listen to those that tell me that I can do it.
Right.
Still love you. You're still my mom. It's all good. But I'm going to listen to those that believe in me.
Yeah, I can still love you and not have to take your advice.
No question.
I can still love you and not desire the outcome you've had for your life,
no
right?
Question.
That's awesome, because it brings me to another point that I love to talk about. This is relationships, because I think the power of association, or surrounding yourself with people who inspire you, uplift you, challenge you to get better. Some people hopefully demand that you get better, right? that requires us to build relationships. And I know for like my wife, for example, she's so good at it. She always has been, social butterfly. It has not always been a strength for me, right? And so for me as a man, like developing a relationship with another man is not always the most comfortable thing in the world. But I realized that if I don't do that, I also don't accomplish what I want to accomplish. So I have to build relationships with people that challenge me, which is an uncomfortable thing to do, right? What would be your advice on building relationships? Obviously, you've done a phenomenal job of building relationships with, that 33, the rule of 33 you just talked about, because you have to develop relationships with all of those people.
Yeah.
So give us some advice on building relationships, developing relationships, and how you go about doing that.
Yeah. Let me start by saying this. First of all, you're absolutely right. Your wife is a total master at this. There's no question. But I also want to give you some props. Like our relationship, it happened because you took proactive steps. Both to reach out. We had some scheduling conflicts before we finally met, and like you stayed on it. You know, even like our time right now, we had some scheduling conflicts, and you stayed on it. So that's a real testament to even if it is uncomfortable or not a natural inclination, you've definitely overcome that. You're really good at it. A couple thoughts on relationships. There's a great book called Never Eat Alone. That I'd study this stuff. By the way, let me say this. Going back to the whole read, listen, surround, apply. Yeah. And building new skills. One of the things that I've done is I'll go deep on certain subjects. So I'll give you guys an example. I kind of nerd out on stuff, and it's probably weird, but I think it's been helpful. Yeah. I studied the Cuban Missile Crisis. Like, I read like 6 books on it and watched every YouTube there was. I just like went deep on that subject. I thought it was fascinating. It was literally the entire world was at the brink of annihilation. And I wanted to learn all the leadership lessons. How did JFK do it? What did Khrushchev over in Russia do? Like, what was Castro's plan? Like, hear all the strategy, what everyone's trying to pull off. I just felt like it was fascinating, you know?
Yeah, especially. Isn't that the story about where JFK told the Soviet Union, hey, if those missiles arrive to...
they were there. The missiles arrived in Cuba.
He said, what did he say? If you don't turn them around, Russia will cease to exist or something like that. JFK said something similar to that.
He did, but he did. He actually did say that. That's exactly what he said. One of the great leadership lessons is the missiles were... we're going to geek out for 2 seconds. The missiles were in Cuba. So Chicago, D.C., New York... Atlanta, any of those would be toast in literally like a matter of minutes. Yeah. And they'd press him and it was kind of game on. Now, he did get tough. One of the lessons, though, he did, it's a great lesson right now during kind of a tough economy, particularly for people that run businesses, is when times are tough, get the smartest people in the room. So they figure out that they have the missiles aimed at them. And he does like basically an offsite and pulls in his brother Bobby and then like 4 or 5 of their top advisors, and they just locked themselves in the room. Another thing he did is he didn't doodle, but he just took these, just like you're doing. He took these notes like this, and they look back at him now, and he put all of his thinking on paper. And just when he would just sit there in his quiet moments, but he wouldn't let him leave the room till they had the plan. And part of the plan was they had to talk a little bit tough. They had to say, yo. But it was, the whole brink of civilization was on the line. So I'll give you another example. Relationships. I've gone deep on relationships. Like I'll go study that subject. Like so in other words, I'm not just like randomly reading books. I'm like, hey, what do I want to learn right now? Right. And just like go deep, like go read all the books you can find on relationships for a while, you know? So Never Eat Alone is a good one. I think getting outside your comfort zone, we talked about that. I have the same thing. There's like, I'm doing an event here in St. George in about a month in St. George, Utah.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I was sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, it was very similar. Like, how can I add value? I was like, I can sit at my house. My business is basically all virtual. So I could like literally sit at my house on my couch and I'm just kind of good. I can run my business. I can add value to my teams in the marketplace and whatever, but like, I don't ever have to leave my house. Right. You know? And I was just like, no, I made 2 promises when I was really struggling. Driving down the freeways on I-15 right by Southtown Mall. So you guys know where this is, back up in Salt Lake. Driving on the freeway, heading towards Salt Lake, and I just have tears rolling on my face. This is that time we talked about. Below zero financially, all the pressure you feel. Like when you're in financial pressure, anyone that is in it or has been through it will know this. Every time you swallow, you can feel the lump in your throat, and you can feel this pressure on your chest. Every time you breathe in, breathe out, you can like feel the weight of the debt on you. It's the strangest thing. It just like never goes away. You like smile, but you're really not smiling. You're like, I am stressed out right now. And I'm driving down the freeway. I have tears rolling down my face, and I'm having this conversation with myself, and I basically am having this conversation with God. And I said, listen, if I ever become successful, I'll never forget what it feels like to struggle. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget what it feels like to have your anniversary date be take your wife to a lunch and you order appetizer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm never going to forget these emotions. Mm-hmm. The second thing is I'm never going to forget. My second promise I made was I'll help as many other people achieve their dreams and achieve their goals as I possibly can. Mm-hmm. Like I'll try and wear myself out saying okay, here's some stuff I learned.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do an event to get, number one, to get all of our top people in the community together, some of our top business people, and there'll be the rule of 33 there. Yep. One of my buddies, I have he's a friend of my son's. My son is 18. His name's Kyler. Do you guys know Kyler?
Mm-hmm. Actually, no, we met him at the gym.
Yeah, we met him the other day, and I want to have him on the podcast. What a great story.
I love this kid, dude. Yeah. He's 17 years old, sold $1.3 million of cars in his car business. He's got his I'm one of his investors in his real estate project.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
He's got a new, it's called Bin Blasters. Like they come and clean your garbages, but it's a franchise that he bought into, and he's franchising. This kid's something else. He's now 18. So I told him, I go, Kyler, you bring how many of your top friends? So we'll have 5 or 6 of these sharp 18-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Cool. That's kids we can go pour into. Yep. We'll have some people there that you're like, dang, these guys are crushing life. Mm-hmm. And then we'll have a bunch of people there, everywhere in between. So I wanted to create that. And then the second thing was I wanted to be able to create a really good networking environment. And then there's things I wanted to share. How do you thrive through a down economy?
Yeah.
And the three main kind of categories I'm going to talk about, distraction, focus, and productivity. Like how do you crush your productivity? There's actual tactical strategies and frameworks that I have learned that are just game changing. Like how do you actually get focused and eliminate distractions? Yeah. Second one is marketing. Like how do you drive more leads? How do you build your personal brand? All the stuff with video and marketing. So even with my account, just with my Facebook account went from 30,000 followers to 500,000 followers in a 2-month period. Like learning how to do some of these things, and that was just a few months ago. Yeah. And we've kind of crushed across all the platforms. And so there's these strategies we can teach people. And then the last one is wealth building, teaching people particularly during a tough time. Here's the thing that's interesting is during this tough time, if you know what you're doing and if you have a plan and if you know how to navigate going in, you could and you should plan on adding a zero.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. These are the greatest times in the history of the world to change your family's life financially.
No question.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But it's also the freaking scariest time on the planet. Everyone's freaked out. Yep. So if you don't have some financial education, you're gonna get buried. So that's what I wanted to talk about with that. But I bring up that event to say that event for me was a way that I can fulfill promise number 2.
Yeah.
Add value to people.
Real quick, is that event sold out?
No, we still have some tickets.
I'm going to put a link. I'm going to put a link in the profile of this video because it'll come out before. Yeah. And so I'll put a link in it, and then people can go there and register.
That'd be awesome.
I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be
a lot of fun.
Yeah. But keep going. Sorry to cut you off.
No, so that's to me. I think the question was if we go back, just building those relationships. By the way, that event, it to me is another way I'm trying to build relationships in our community. Yeah, get all of our best people together. One of the things you want to say on relationships is how can I add value?
Yes, right.
And not just how can I add value, it's hey, what can I do for you? And they're like, nothing, dude, you're good. But doing things that add value.
Right.
I'll give you an example. This is just to illustrate the point. My son and I went to Costa Rica with John C. Maxwell. Mm-hmm. John Maxwell, for you guys that don't know him, he's the world's foremost authority on leadership, written 100 plus books on leadership. So I think 35 million copies at this point. So we're there as this little kind of intimate group. And the very first night it was me, John, and my son at dinner with this about 8 or 10 of us. And my son at the time is 17 years old. We go get in the elevators after we're driving or going up to our room. And my son looks at me totally sincere. And he goes, Dad? I'm like, yes, son. And he goes, how do I add value to John Maxwell? And I remember thinking, you don't. You just enjoy the trip, dude. He's 75, you're 17. I don't know what you're going to do to add value. But he was so sincere in his question. I thought, okay, what can you do? So we made a decision. We kind of talked about it. And I said, what if you wrote him a note, a handwritten note? That'd be kind of cool. Give him a little card, a little note.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I look at my son throughout the rest of the trip, and I would see him pulled off on the side, and he'd have his phone out, and he'd be writing these notes. Anyway, he ends up writing not a note, but a letter, and not one letter, but 10 letters. He writes them to all the kind of key people that were on this thing. He's the youngest person there by a mile, right? Yeah. And the very last night, he gives it to John. They have a super sweet experience when he gives it to John. And the very last night, John circles us up. He's going to go speak in the next room for 6,000 people. We're circled up in the kind of the green room. And he goes, be unforgettable. Be unforgettable. You want to build relationships? Learn to be unforgettable. And he goes, be unforgettable to your customers, be unforgettable to your clients. I hope that this event, people leave like, that was an unforgettable event. You know what I'm saying? Like, be unforgettable.
Right.
So my son, John, opens up his jacket like this and pulls out this letter. He goes, Isaac, you're unforgettable. And he goes, this letter was unforgettable. And he gave them to all the kind of key people. One of the guys is a real estate, he owns Keller Williams brokerages out in North Carolina. So he's like a franchise owner. He owns a bunch of them. Mm-hmm. And he's our age, kind of a younger guy. He has some young boys, I think they're like 4 and 6. His name's Jeff. So he wrote Jeff a letter. Jeff goes up to me, he says, Justin, he goes, I just want you to know something. If my sons ever wrote a letter like that to someone, he goes, it'll be my proudest day as a father. Mm-hmm. He goes, that was a really sweet letter.
I just wrote that on my notes, man. How does that make you feel as a dad?
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
They took his letter and they framed it in the Asheville, North Carolina office. And people go there because the CEO there, she's since written me a letter and stuff, but they put it there because it shows the values of the office, the values of the ownership team, and like who they are as a company. And I share this story because Isaac was unforgettable. Mm-hmm. Isaac built these relationships. Jeff Stewart would do anything for Isaac.
Yeah.
John Maxwell would do anything for Isaac.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was unforgettable.
Yeah. Right.
So you say, how do I add value? And not just like, hey, what can I do for you? It's like, dude, write the letter.
Yeah.
Like think, like get a couple steps ahead of yourself. And here's the other great lesson from that story. I was resting on my laurels. Yeah. I thought like, I don't know what I thought for sure. I don't know if I even processed it, but like I'm successful enough, I'll just show up and be there. Mm-hmm. Or I didn't like seek for ways to add value. I wasn't looking for ways like he was. I wasn't asking the question, what can I do to add value to this? Now today I try and get a couple steps ahead of myself and say, what can I do to add value? Yeah. And that's a great lesson. How can you be unforgettable to people? And that's how you build great relationships.
Yeah, it's awesome. You ask what value can your son provide to John Maxwell? And that's inspired. He inspired him, right? He inspired him just through
absolutely.
And such a small thing can inspire anybody, right? And I think that another note I wrote is people underestimate the power of a handwritten note a lot of times.
No doubt.
Oh yeah.
Especially in today's society, just writing someone a thank you note or anything, and just how it makes somebody feel, right? People don't forget it.
That's
they
right.
become unforgettable because you made them feel special in that moment, which probably inspired some sort of emotion. And people may not remember exactly what you said, but they always remember how you feel.
Made him feel.
Right?
No question about it.
Yeah, incredible, man. I think today's been amazing. Anything you want to ask him before?
I was going to ask you what your purpose was, but I think you just explained it to us because that's something I think successful people, after the money is out of the way, you no longer need to make money, and it's what can you do to help other people achieve their dreams and be unforgettable. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so powerful. I mean, I love that. And you better sign me up for that event.
Yeah.
I know you signed yourself up for that event. But
I got a bunch of people coming, man. I'm excited about it.
Can't wait to have you.
So let's end on this. Maybe going through all that, we talked a lot about your journey. I know it's hard sometimes to brag about our lives. We live them and it's just normal to us, right? But at one point, I think, you dreamed about maybe one. I don't even know if you could dream that big to live the life you're living today.
Yeah, for sure.
What's it like, man? I know, we talk about it's so much bigger and it's hard to explain, but maybe just try for a minute to maybe reflect on those times and how it feels about today and accomplishing this.
Yeah, that is a great question. It's surreal is what it is. Like to your point, there's sometimes when you just live your life and you're just living your life, but then there's times you're like stop and you're like, holy cow, like what is happening?
Yeah.
And I think some of the ways I would describe it is, if you want to go somewhere, you go. if you want to take some people, you take them. You just kind of can kind of go where you want to go, do what you want to do. Right. And you can do it with the people you want to do it with, Mm-hmm. It's made me more hungry, and it's made me have more hustle, which is interesting. I remember like that. I made $10,000, so I'm going to let off the gas. I'm like smashing the gas down even harder because I'm like, I want to serve at a higher level. And sometimes I'm like, it's so funny. Like I'll do it, and that adds more pressure. It's more dream struggle. You're in the struggle of like figuring it all out. Even put on the event, you got all these details you got to put on the event, and then I'm like, why am I doing this again? Mm-hmm. And then it's like, dude, you're doing this because you promised yourself that you would do this. You keep trying to, add value to people and serve people at a high level. And so for me, I still feel like I'm in the fight. I don't feel like I take too many victory laps. I still feel like I'm spinning around, just, working hard, but it's really an incredible experience. I'll wrap it up by saying this. So Jim Rohn talked about creating and designing an extraordinary life. Mm-hmm. He said it's possible.
Right.
It's possible to create and to design an extraordinary life. And now I get to add my testimonial to the wall and my personal experience to tell people that listen to this, like, your dreams and your goals are possible. Mm-hmm. And it's possible for you to create and to design an extraordinary life.
Yeah.
It is. It's more than possible. I think, like one of the things I wrote the other day is, like, you said what you would have told yourself at the rest stop, and that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. And it was like, if I could go back and tell that guy that was so scared, it was like, God will deliver, right? Bigger than you can imagine, and it's like, I just remember being so scared and like, is it going to happen for me, right?
Yeah,
and then
I have the same questions.
Now, being able to wake up every day in that creative space, right? Where we were talking on the way over here, we're working on a project right now, and on that one project, we will have made more money than our entire career in financial services.
Crazy.
And it was because of relationships, skill sets. It took us that many years to build those skill sets, the belief that we could do it.
Right.
All of these things you talked about today, and then just being able to operate out of that sense of creativity and wake up every day and go, we grind harder or work harder and focus more out of this creation, this love of knowing that you can dream of something and you can accomplish it, right?
I love that.
What an amazing life we get to live, right? If we choose to.
I love that. Yeah, you guys have created a situation where you're not waking up and your dominant thought is, how do I pay the bill Friday? Or how do I put food on the table today? And that's a beautiful place to be in. If you're listening to this and you're like, that's all great for you guys.
Yeah.
But like, I'm like, how do I freaking put milk in the fridge? Like, I want to, like, all the stuff we talked about is how you get there. But the point is you need to get to this next phase to where you can wake up and think of other things besides, how do I put milk in the fridge?
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And the reason why is because it's hard to serve at a higher level when we're so primal. And like, I've got to feed the kids,
Right.
Yeah.
And I know what that feels like. So I'm not in any way putting it down, but you have to move past that season,
right?
Where you guys are now compounding all these 20 years of effort. You're compounding it into this next project. It compounds because of all the work that you did to put milk on the table and to buy the new couch.
Right. How worth it is. Well, thank you, man, for doing the podcast today. I think you're going to inspire a lot of people with this, and I think we're going to get a lot of feedback.
Love it.
Thanks for investing
Appreciate
time.
Appreciate it, guys. You're the best. Fun to see you.